here. We appreciate your coming to spend worship with us on this auspicious day in the life of our church. I want to be sure to ask you that if you are a visitor or you haven't been here in a while, we would very much appreciate having you sign our guest book at the front of the church so that we know you're here, and invite you all to stay afterwards to participate in our special congregational meeting immediately following worship. After which point, the members of the congregation will have a chance to vote on the nominee for our next settled minister, the Reverend Dr. Daniel Geslin.
Well, that was some party we had last night. It got me so revved up I had a hard time sleeping. But that party last night reminds me of our gospel story today, in which Jesus goes to a party. And this gospel story really begs the question, was Jesus a party animal? The answer is yes. Jesus made wine for a party. I did the math the other day, and it works out to 180 gallons of wine. That's 1,000 of our standard bottles of wine, which is pretty extreme. Water into wine is the kind of transformation we experience in Christ. We start out as sort of regular, boring water, but encountering Jesus turns us into rich red wine that not only makes us the life of the party, but can be used in cooking to nurture and nourish us, and has medicinal healing qualities as well. The transformation of water into wine, symbolizing our transformation, is reinforced by the image of the wedding in which the whole story takes place. Both our Jewish and Christian readings for today are about weddings. In Isaiah, the community of faith gets married to God. And in John, a wedding is the site of Jesus' first sign of who he is for us. Weddings transform lives. Life in ancient Israel was hard. So during the time of Christ, Jewish weddings were gala occasions, festive events, grand parties. Ancient Jewish weddings usually began on Tuesday, when a 7-day party began. That first night, the groom and his groomsmen would parade through the village, swinging their olive oil lamps, having a fun time. And each of those 7 days, family and friends would visit the bride's house, bringing gifts, hot dishes, and good humor. Everyone in the village would party for 7 days. Now, Jesus is at such a wedding party. And that was probably disappointing to the social activists of the time who thought that Jesus should stay in inner city Jerusalem solving social problems. Maybe it was disappointing to the do-gooders who thought that Jesus should spend time only with the lepers, the blind, and the lame, and should never have fun, for heaven's sakes. It was probably scandalous to the sour-faced fundamentalists of the day who thought that we should always be pious and never party, and if Jesus did go to a party, he should only drink grape juice. But here he is at a party that is lasting 7 days. That's the time it took to create the whole world. But now the host runs out of wine. How embarrassing. You just can't run out of wine at a Jewish wedding. And they couldn't drive a camel to a 7-Eleven or a liquor store down the street. So Mary intervenes. Evidently, the Blessed Mother is also a partier. She says to Jesus, "They've run out of wine." And Jesus replies, well, what does that have to do with me? But Mary just ignores her son and says to the servant, do whatever he tells you to. We can only guess the look on Jesus' face. Maybe he rolls his eyes as he says to the servant, fill those big jugs with water out there on the patio. Now these were huge jugs, 30 gallons apiece. And these vats were used for the rite of purification. Before a worship service, any worship service, including a wedding, the ancient Jews washed their faces, hands, and feet. So these holy water baths were for the rite of purification, to ritually wash away their sins before approaching God in worship. What Jesus is about to do is like using Catholic holy water to make Harvey Wallbangers. It's a sacrilege. There's something deeper going on in this story than just turning water into wine. Jesus is turning religion into a party. Jesus is creating a whole new world. Jesus says to the servant, I want these vats filled to the brim. Not half full, not 3/4 full, not even 7/8 full. I want them filled right up to the brim. I want them fuller than full. I want them overflowing. So the servants fill those 6 jugs right up to their lips. Jesus then says to the waiter, please take a glass of this wine to the chief steward of the party and see what he thinks. And when the chief steward sips it, he says, yum. Talk about stewardship. The groom has saved the best wine until last. He looks out at those 6 vats of wine on the patio and he says, that's a lot of wine. St. John, who wrote this story, wants to give us the impression that there is enough wine here for the whole village of Hancock, for the whole state of Maine, indeed for the whole world. The story ends with John writing, this was the first of the signs that revealed who Jesus is. Who Jesus is. It's a sign that Christ is with us. A sign that Christ can transform us. A sign that Christ can make a whole new world. I flash back to the beginning of the Gospel of John, just the previous chapter, the prelude, where John writes, from his fullness we have all received grace upon grace. That fullness of grace is like the fullness of those 6 vats of wine filled right up to the brim. In our bulletin cover art this morning, I feel like the flowing of the water into wine from one jug to another suggests maybe flowing from one person to another, or one generation to another, one century to another, as we participate in Jesus' ongoing movement of turning water into wine, turning religion into a party, transforming lives and creating a whole new world. The meaning of this sign is not so much just water into wine. The message is that Jesus took 180 gallons of guilt, 180 gallons of religious rules and rites of purification, 100 gallons of you must do this and you can't do that, and transformed them into something new, a new meaning, a new wine that as it ferments and expands, bursts open the old religion of law and transforms it into a new spirituality of love.